Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Schwartz, for that introduction. I very much appreciate it. Again, my name is Jane Hartsock, and I am the Assistant Director of Clinical and Organizational Ethics for IU Health, among some other hats I wear, including being faculty at the IU Center for Bioethics. Let me see if I can make this. Here we go. I have no relevant financial conflicts of interest to disclose. I know there's supposed to be a joke here, right? Like you're welcome to give me the financial conflicts of interest. I'd be more than happy to accept them, or something like that. Okay, so as Dr. Schwartz began during his introduction, the ethical use of AI seems to be a very hot topic at the moment. Understatement that is. Every time I turn around, I'm receiving an email inviting me to listen to a podcast, a lecture, attend a symposium, go to a CLE, go to a conference about artificial intelligence. I've attended or watched some of these. They range from a symposium last May here at IU, in which a researcher trained an AI bot on Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, then noted that it started acting kind of strangely. I'm assuming it developed moral reasoning in lockstep with its development of language, then demonstrated an understanding of having been mistreated, and then wanted to kill the researcher and his family. Just a guess. More recently, I attended a panel discussion put on by the law school just last week about artificial intelligence and whether it's compatible with Indiana's existing rules of professional responsibility for attorneys. I think many of these conversations have presented the issues attendant to the ethical use of this technology too narrowly, with the focus largely being on things like privacy and confidentiality, propensity to bias, what constitutes cheating, without engaging the larger questions of what exactly is it that you are doing when you use something like ChatGPT? What system are you engaging? What harms are you perpetuating? One presenter at a discussion I recently attended dismissed concerns about AI with the quip, "New tools, old rules," suggesting that the accountability for the output of generative AI still exists with the user. So if, say, you put a bunch of PHI into ChatGPT and ask it to draft you a chart note, that's a HIPAA violation. And there's already a regulatory apparatus for holding that individual accountable for using AI in that way. Again, I think these kinds of analyses understand the ethical implications of this technology too narrowly. And as we will get to, I believe that we have new tools, no rules, or perhaps more generously, hopelessly inadequate rules, and a lag in the development of rules during which this technology is operating essentially unchecked. As a way to get to our larger discussion today, I'm going to define the relevant terminology here. This will require us to stipulate to a meaning for purposes of this discussion. As many of you know, there's no agreed upon definition of artificial intelligence. This sometimes gets presented as if it is an insurmountable obstacle in discussing the implications of AI. I don't think that it is. I'm a lawyer, so we're going to define the term and then we're going to talk about it. We will identify two ethical conflicts in the existing approach to AI use and regulation. And on the way, I will also address some of the additional, more granular concerns about AI as they relate specifically to writing and authorship. Then we will describe some approaches that mitigate or could mitigate to some degree the potential harm of continued use of AI and large language models. All right, so I'm going to take a little sip of water here. Because the concept of artificial intelligence existed before the technology, and because the definition of intelligence itself is hard to nail down, there is at present no single definition of artificial intelligence. Here are several, including the one offered by the person who coined the term, John McCarthy. You can see some of the individuals or entities that are involved in this conversation. Makes sense. The Alan Turing Institute, the United States government, UNESCO, agencies such as that. We're going to use the definition offered by the Alan Turing Institute because I think it actually best encompasses the other existing definitions. And so this definition of AI, which adopts the Minsky definition, is the science of making computers do things that require intelligence when they're done by humans. So a rather broad definition, but I think it works. I want to pause for a second here and talk a little bit about the way we talk about artificial intelligence. Oftentimes when defining these terms, people will get a little bit sloppy and they'll say these technologies are designed to think the way humans think. They are not. They are designed to mimic the expression of human thought or speech, but they are not thinking at all. They process large quantities of data, recognize patterns within those data, and make predictions in response to prompting from humans. So, for example, the kind of distinction I'm making goes something like this. Let's say I walk up to Dr. Schwartz and without any preliminaries, simply say to him or ask him, whose car is parked across the street from my house? Dr. Schwartz would look at me and respond something along the lines of, what are you talking about? We've known each other a long time. He might be more colorful than that. But Dr. Schwartz would look at me and say, what are you talking about? I asked this question to ChatGPT in this manner last week and received the response, I cannot see your house right now, and so can't tell you who is parked in front of it. It did suggest that I ask a neighbor. But the real issue was that it didn't understand the question as a human would and didn't respond as a human would. The question I was actually asking was not who is parked across the street from my house. The question I was asking was, what will you do in response to a non sequitur question that makes no sense in the absence of any pre-existing context? Peter would say, what the hell are you talking about? The impediment to answering the question in Peter's mind is that the question itself does not make sense. The impediment to answering the question in ChatGPT's algorithm is that it simply can't see my house, right? So we understand the difference here as we start to think about minds. Now, AI is going somewhere. So this example will not hold up over time. This distinction will probably not hold up over time. And so it's important to understand that the technologies are becoming more sophisticated, faster, more complex. It's important to understand where we are headed and that this technology is intended to continue to develop. Of course it is, right? These are not merely aspirations. They are the objectives of the developers of this technology and of the governments around the world. So this represents on the screen here, this represents a progression in the sophistication and development of AI. Narrow AI can perform specific tasks, potentially at a level that matches or surpasses human performance. Artificial general intelligence can perform many cognitive tasks across many domains. Human level AI could perform all tasks that humans can do. Transformative AI would perform tasks that have a dramatic impact on society, at least at the level of the Industrial Revolution. And then artificial superintelligence would be a system that surpasses human performance on virtually all intellectual tasks. And examining a definition of artificial superintelligence, this would be the kind of artificial intelligence that would be able to ask questions we can't conceive of and then produce information we can't understand. So where are we today? Sorry, just a little Inferno joke. So we are roughly here. And you'll notice that I have the you are here arrow kind of between narrow AI and artificial general intelligence. This reflects a disagreement among scientists and theorists about whether ChatGPT is artificial general intelligence or narrow AI. So most people will argue or would argue that it is narrow AI because it has no embodiment and so is not capable of perceiving. And that becomes kind of important when you, one of the things that's strange when you chat with Chat GPT is that it will oftentimes mimic human thought. It will provide descriptions and explanations as if it has extensive properties, the ability to perceive the world. And this can be somewhat confusing. It's one of the reasons that ethicists within this conversation have argued that people should not create AI that's anthropomorphized because the confusion of seeing a human-ish entity and then engaging with something that speaks as humans do, as if it has the possibility of perceiving, can be confusing. So, all right, so with these two preliminaries in mind, I will proceed. All right, so my first argument is that it is my position that the use of artificial intelligence and particularly large language models like ChatGPT will do more harm than good. I think that AI will, on the whole, be bad for humans. The primary domains that I'm concerned with and that will be addressed in this discussion are equity and agnotology, and I'll define those terms a little bit later in the discussion. The second thing I will be arguing, or am arguing, is that we cannot not continue to develop AI. Indeed, we as a nation need to develop better AI more quickly than other countries as a matter of national security and safety. In fact, as I was writing this presentation this morning, the White House released a national security memorandum arguing that we need to develop more AI, specifically by the Pentagon for purposes of surveilling hostile foreign governments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So historians and political science experts and economists are predicting that AI will have as great an impact on human advancement as the Industrial Revolution. In fact, AI is predicted by some to be the, quote, fourth industrial revolution. So imagine if the US had simply declined to use the internal combustion engine, rejected the concept of the factory, banned the radio. As Jeffrey Ding, professor of political science at George Washington University, has pointed out, nations that win in technological advancement then win in economic growth and in geopolitical and military power and influence. I'll note that Ding defines winning slightly differently than we seem to be doing at present. He focuses primarily on the effective adaptation of a technology, not necessarily its invention. That doesn't really change what we're going to talk about today. This is his book, recently published. I have purchased it. I'm about 16 pages into it. Seems pretty good. Anyway, I see this as the central ethical tension of AI. It will be bad, but we have to do it. We're not really in a space of whether we can use AI, although on a smaller scale, as you'll see, there are certain places where I argue AI has no place and should not be used. This is slightly different than the question of whether we should develop the technology and continue to advance it. And this is a little bit of what I mean when I say that much of this conversation seems to be engaging in this topic a little bit too narrowly. So our focus in some way shifts to how we anticipate and minimize or mitigate the associated harms. Still, I'm going to address some of the more discrete concerns that relate specifically to writing and authorship here on the front end. This is one of my favorite memes ever. I use it all of the time. It means something a little bit different in this context. So in addition to being faculty with IUCB and working in ethics over at IU Health, I am also an adjunct professor with the Medical Humanities and Health Studies program over at the School of Liberal Arts. And I am aware of and share the general frustration of educators that our students are using AI primarily to cheat, to produce papers either quickly or better than the student would be able to do themselves, which oftentimes means that they also don't have to read the material that informs the paper. So essentially, they have produced an assignment without learning one damn thing. I share the concern that this is plagiarism, that it will make our students dumber, and that it is a form of academic misconduct. Similarly, I stand with artists and authors whose work has been stolen from them by way of scraping for purposes of training AI, and who feel inadequately protected by everyone from their publishers to their legislatures. One estimate is that ChatGPT has been trained on the equivalent of 3.7 billion pages of writing, or 300 billion words. It has done that almost entirely without the consent or compensation of authors who hold copyrights on this material. Because the purpose of ChatGPT is to then generate content through synthesis that imitates, there are real questions about whether this process is theft or conversion, and whether the resultant product is plagiarism or copyright infringement. You see this most clearly when you give AI a prompt of some kind and then ask it to write, say, a 6,000 word short story in the voice of a specific author. It can do this. Patchett, Napolitano, Irving come to mind as authors with a distinct enough voice that it could be imitated. Other authors, Dickens and whatnot, could also be imitated, but are not, arguably, they're in the public domain and present different copyright issues. My position is that this is definitely theft and plagiarism, and probably copyright infringement. The recent lawsuit by the New York Times against OpenAI is going to test this. Is scraping and generating output in this way copyright infringement? We will see, but I hope so. All right, so Penguin is one publisher that has come out and taken a stand, or attempted to take a stand on this issue, and I'm glad to see that they are doing that. I wish more would. I do wonder whether they're too late. The horse has left the barn, so to speak. In academic publishing, we're seeing similar issues. Both authors and reviewers using AI to do work. Authors and reviewers using AI to do work. So I would argue that if you take a manuscript you've been sent for review and run it through ChatGPT, you violated your ethical obligation of confidentiality as it relates to the review of the manuscript. Having AI write your review for you, or review your review and make modifications to it, probably also violates confidentiality to the extent that it would be difficult to provide a comprehensive written review of a document without giving the AI, at the very least, the concept of the paper you're reviewing that informs it, the methods, and the conclusion it reaches. So some publishers are doing a better job of addressing these concerns than others. Sage has a very broad statement, simply requiring a person to disclose the extent to which they are using AI. Springer is doing a slightly better job of this. These are the 5 values that they embrace in their approach to the use of AI. And these are the same 5 values that are advanced by the Alan Turing Institute in its Guide for the Responsible Design and Implementation of AI Systems in the Public Sector. So all that said, if you want to know whether you're allowed to use ChatGPT to write your manuscripts for review or reviews, the answer is it depends on the journal. Read the submission requirements. A very interesting answer, I suppose. Also, know whether your institution allows you to count for promotion and tenure those manuscripts you publish using generative AI. So read the rules, as it were. Then, as a preliminary matter, before we head into the meat of this discussion, I want to address what I see as real uncertainty in this area. So returning to the, what was the comment? New tools, same rules. And my general sense that that is actually not quite accurate. The US Copyright Office has recently taken the position that those things produced by AI cannot be copyrighted. I see this as good in many ways, but it may have a compounding effect eventually. So follow me here. If there is an eventual determination that AI companies cannot scrape copyrighted material without consent or compensation, then AI will scrape from things that are not copyrighted and produce things that are not copyrightable, resulting in a kind of perpetuation of a very narrow and not particularly high-grade output from a technology whose use and application seems to be increasing. We can think about this as analogous to the problem of paywalls. One of the unmet promises of the internet is that it would democratize information. But what we see is that high-quality information, like the New England Journal of Medicine, the Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, put most of their articles behind paywalls. They make you pay for it. Breitbart does not. So the question of what people know is influenced by the information they can access. And that information is not especially good for the majority of people using the internet. So, turning to my two primary concerns with the long-term continued advancement of AI. So my first concern is that AI will exacerbate existing inequities. So there is a theoretical utopia in which AI takes on the menial tasks we all hate and simultaneously increases our productivity and leisure time. So we hand over to AI the work of paying bills, doing our taxes, scheduling doctor's appointments. We allow it to assist us in diagnosing patients more accurately, completing pre-authorizations, drafting discharge instructions. The efficiency produced by AI might allow you to see 10 patients a day instead of 25, and to spend more time talking to them, answering questions. Or it might allow you to see 10 patients a day and then go home. And with all of your free time, you can garden, you can visit with friends, you can spend time with your families, you can go running, you can play euchre, you can hang out with your pets. That world is not ours. Ours is a world that is rife with existing systems of oppression, systems that are either designed to produce inequity or that we know already do. Systems like patriarchy, capitalism, racism, misogyny. Into those systems, we are tossing a technology that is not likely to result in more leisure time, but more joblessness and consequently more poverty. A note about the limitations of some of these predictions, just to kind of give us a little bit of a lay of the land. AI technology is new enough that we have not quite seen what the long-term effects will be on employment related to AI taking jobs. What is largely contained in the literature are estimations of particular domains of work or particular jobs that are AI affected or likely to be touched by AI. And so all of these predictions are based on thoughts about what may happen in those jobs that we are pretty sure may be affected by AI. So predictions about predictions essentially is where we are with this. So a 2003 survey of leading AI researchers put the probability of all human occupations being fully automated at 10% by 2037. And the estimate rises to 50% probability within the next 100 years. The IMF estimates that AI will impact 60% of jobs in advanced economies, that it will touch 60% of jobs in advanced economies. The McKinsey Global Institute estimates that 29.5% of all hours worked could be automated by 2030. 79% of women are employed in roles that could be affected by AI compared to only 58% of men. The corresponding increase in the demand for STEM work in this space will augment racial and gender disparities. The kinds of jobs that are likely to be replaced here are middle-class jobs. So efficiency will not look like you think it will in this new economy. What is likely to happen is that instead of seeing 10 patients instead of 25, you will continue to see 25, but half of your clinic will lose their job. Wealth then will coalesce at the top. The technology will be used to increase profits, not spread wealth or increase leisure. I wanted to say a little bit more about that with respect to the effect on the middle class. So jobs that exist at perhaps what we would think of as lower socioeconomic positions are jobs that require largely human labor. And those will probably be the last to be touched by AI technology. Those jobs already pay relatively little as compared to, say, CEO of OpenAI. The jobs that are likely to be affected are actually those middle tier jobs that require some kind of human functioning and cognition, desk jobs, computer related jobs. Those jobs are the ones that are likely to be affected by AI. And what we know from existing history is that wealth does not trickle down. And so as companies attempt to maximize their profits by promoting efficiency of their workers, that's likely to lead to layoffs. And it already has in some domains, right? So AI usage for customer service is the go-to right now for the kind of early canary in the coal mine in terms of this particular phenomenon. All right. So my more fundamental concern is a concern about the destruction of knowledge, getting us back to the conversation about writing and authorship. So for those of you who don't know, these two slides are from one of my favorite movies, Idiocracy. I see some nods in the crowd. So Idiocracy is a movie from the 1990s, I think the late 1990s, in which a man subjects himself to a military experiment. He is placed in a cryogenic state and wakes up 500 years in the future to find that the human race has devolved into an almost unrecognizable form. And during part of this, he takes a tour of what is sort of like the Disney World, whatever that is, like when you go and all the different countries. But it's a history tour. And the history has been so degraded that it's almost unrecognizable. And the line here for the one on the bottom is that Charlie Chaplin saved the world from the Nazis, like this massive confusion of what actually has happened over history. Another line is that the came in and un-Nazied the world, like this absolute nonsense, very funny. But the idea there was that there would be a sort of loss of our connection to our past. And this is my fundamental concern with ChatGPT and large language models. I think the concern about employment and labor is really, really important. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But my primary concern is that we will lose track of what constitutes truth and knowledge and our own human history. So these are agnotological concerns. Agnotology is the study of ignorance. So it is the opposite of epistemology, the study of knowledge. And this theory was developed by Stanford philosopher Robert Proctor and historian Londa Scheinbinger. So this is, I think, a real concern that we need to have. The White House, which is responsible for AI, which has been largely responsible for AI regulations right now in the United States, the entities that they are assigning for supervision of and developing regulations around AI should tell you something about what they are concerned about, what the White House is primarily concerned about with respect to AI. And it's this. So the White House released in 2023 the executive order on the safe, secure, and trustworthy development of the use of artificial intelligence. And the people overseeing that are the Secretary of Commerce, that would make sense, the Pentagon, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Secretary of Energy. The latest memo reflects an intent to use AI for large-scale surveillance, which feels inevitable. And other countries are probably developing it in this way as well, so the arms race continues. But there are additional concerns at work here too, including the destruction of knowledge incidentally, what I kind of jokingly refer to as the cycle of stupidity. So early AI is really, really bad. Like we kind of remember, like maybe even 2 years ago, when students started submitting papers written by AI, and the like big words, small ideas, the citations are all a mess. Like the things don't say what they're supposed to say. You can, like, I remember grading papers and reading the references section and being able to just Google, right, the citation, and it would not exist. And that's how you would know that the paper was written by AI, because AI could not put together adequate citations. And so that's kind of continued to a lesser degree. Students have gotten a little bit better at it. So now what they'll do with these kinds of things is they'll input, say, 5 or 6 actual articles and say, write me a paper about that includes these articles. And so then what you have to do as somebody grading these papers is look at the citation and the claim made related to the citation, read the article, and see if the article actually says that. So it becomes very labor intensive, right? You might just ask ChatGPT to grade the paper. I don't know. But it becomes very labor intensive. And it's a pain, right? I mean, like I see my fellow colleagues in the room like, oh, this is going to take so much time. It's going to be such a pain in the butt. And it's really true. But the problem is more fundamental than that, right? Because what ends up happening is that these papers potentially make their way back into the scraping system, right? In some kind of, without any kind of sort of validation or vetting check on the document itself. And these are student papers, and we might kind of like say, okay, well, you know, how much weight are we supposed to give to student papers? I don't know. Ask the people developing the algorithms for these. There's no way for us to know what kind of weight is being given to the scraping that is taking place here. And just a small asterisk that there is a real interest from AI companies in having access to portals like Canvas for exactly this purpose. So, which is arguably a FERPA violation at present, but we'll kind of see what happens with it, right? Let me take a little bit of drink of water. I'm getting kind of worked up. So, so what I'm concerned with here is a kind of telephone game, right? Where you have the recitation, well, I guess sort of 2 ways, right? You have the recitation of some kind of inaccuracy that then gets scraped and pulled into documents that might be then subsequently recited in, say, a peer-reviewed scholarly journal, right? And maybe the reviewer runs that journal through ChatGPT and they're like, yeah, we've got that data in here. That looks fine, right? And you've lost that. The second concern I have is one that lawyers will probably recognize, which is an inability to essentially shepherdize information, to find the original source of that information. So a paper written that includes a summary of an article, a sentence, say, summary of an article, and a citation, and then your inability to identify where did that information come from, because it didn't come from this article. Where did it come from? Where is this claim? Where can I verify this particular claim? And then the extent to which that claim then gets attached to a particular citation, maybe even attached to a particular author, right? So you have a controversial statement made in a paper that suddenly, you know, John Smith has necessarily said in the citations, except he didn't. I mean, and that gets continued on. So that's incidental. That assumes that the people who are using ChatGPT are at worst a little lazy, right? This is not necessarily a concern with malicious content, but it is a real danger. So perhaps more concerning is the malicious deployment of AI to do exactly the thing that I'm talking about, intentionally do it. And the government seems to be very aware of this potential and very concerned about it, particularly in the lead up to this election. The Brookings Institute in May had an entire symposium about the risk of disinformation posed by AI during an election year in which there are multiple elections going on in multiple countries, including the United States. For those of you who didn't know, there's an election coming up. Please go vote. So there's a simple reality that you as a user don't have any ability to interrogate the algorithms. And so the ability to engage in some kind of skepticism about what you're reading has now been hampered, right? Anything that you are reading at all is now hampered because you have no way of knowing whether it was produced using AI, and you have no way of knowing if it was produced by AI, what the algorithm was that informed it. So we have that whole malicious thing. I'm also, as I've mentioned, concerned about consolidating or using paywalls for trusted AI. So you can imagine that out of this system will emerge some companies that say, we're the good guys. And if you want to know whether or not your article is good, or if you want to produce an article that is well documented, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you can pay us $500 a year and we'll be your company to do that. And so then you'll have this kind of consolidating of trusted AI behind paywalls in the same way that you do now with any other kind of content. And then the final thing that I'm very much concerned about is what I refer to as nudging. I don't refer to it as that. AI people in this conversation are referring to it as nudging. And here's what I mean by that. I'm going to take a nice innocuous analogy and then we'll ratchet it up. Imagine an AI company CEO or programmer who feels very, very, very strongly that the sky is yellow and not blue. So he did not train his AI on any documents or materials that assert that the sky is blue, which he can do. Because that's nonsense, he thinks, the sky is not blue. Consequently, when users engage with his AI and ask it questions and whatnot, it does not ever refer to the existence of a blue sky. It asks, if a user asks it, as I would, because I'm kind of argumentative, I like to fight with ChatGPT occasionally. Hey, isn't the sky blue? It might make a statement back like, I do not make qualitative judgments about color. I have no apparatus for seeing. But it doesn't reinforce an objective reality. It actually undermines it. And it does so because the programmer has some personal view or perhaps stake in the sky not being blue. So now imagine, I said I was going to ratchet it up and I am. I joked with Peter before this that my Marvel superpower is catastrophizing. If you want to know what could go wrong, just come ask me and I will tell you. So now imagine that nudging is taking place to perpetuate the lie that Trump won the 2020 election, or that you have AI that refuses to refer to the January 6th insurrection as an insurrection, or that refers to the enslaved population of the United States as workers, or that treats social Darwinism or eugenics as scientifically valid theories that we might want to reconsider, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There is no check on the moral compass of the people programming the algorithms, programming the AI. So this problem has an exponential effect for two reasons. The first is that it seems not entirely clear whether information used to train a bot can be subsequently removed. So let's say the whole system gets a revamping and scraping is copyright infringement, and or maybe we have something a little bit less than that where AI companies have to seek consent or authorization to scrape your documents. And you say, no, you don't have that from me. How is that information removed from something as large and complex as, say, ChatGPT? Can that ever be removed? The second problem is that we are now in a system in which AI is scraping content generated by AI. So the inaccuracies produced either by unintentional, malicious, or self-interested algorithms will be recited over and over and over. So those are my primary concerns. And so now I'm going to propose some very discrete solutions, easy to implement, I'm sure. All right, so the Turing Institute issues a framework informed by two fields for grappling with the ethics of AI. The first is bioethics, and the second is a human rights discourse. So that conversation existing within the human rights sphere. This is in contrast to what the United States government is doing, which is doubling down on STEM, and specifically recruiting people who are involved in computer programming and tech development, and focusing very, very strongly on that. I did read one paper, very interesting, which encouraged a consideration of using philosophers like Rawls for thinking about a society in which AI plays as large a role as we think it will. So that idea of the original position in the veil of ignorance, and imagining what kind of world we want to create as algorithms are designed. But in some ways, what we need are just like these really discrete protections. We're going to need a revision to the tax code. And AI companies should be taxed in the same way that property is taxed or capital gains are taxed, that there's a tax on AI companies specifically for purposes of offsetting what is likely to be a labor disruption, and addressing what I predict will be an incredible amount of poverty and disparity of wealth. We probably need a universal basic income at this point. We need regulations that require companies selling AI to disclose what they anticipate to be the worker displacement. They need to do the work. Companies using AI to increase efficiency need to be accountable to those who they displace. And we need restrictions on AI in the production of things that we think of as being inherently, intrinsically human, things like art, music, film, literature. And I want to say just a little bit about that. Am I okay? I'm okay, a little bit okay at time. I just want to say a little bit about that, this idea of those things that are so intrinsically human that the effect of AI on them changes what it means for us to be human. A lot of the really interesting moments in art have to do with innovation, right? The people that I'm thinking of, that I kept thinking of over and over again as I was putting this together, were people like Stravinsky, Nijinsky, Pollock, right? Whose art so wholly departed from what existed that it was something new. And my concern is that we lose that if we lean into an AI world in which we essentially close the universe, right? We have what exists at this moment, and AI uses it and continues to use it and continues to use it. And we lose that part of what it means to be a human who innovates and creates and does something different. So I'm very, very concerned about that. The consequences for disinformation also need to be probably more rigorous. There should be penalties, really severe penalties for AI companies for even the inadvertent publication of false information, right? Even that sort of sloppy student paper that has the citations that don't actually exist. That should be a finable offense. We need updates to concepts about how far a copyright extends, and it should prohibit scraping and training. And beyond that, our existing frameworks require reconsideration. We're going to have to get really, really serious about prioritizing truth in a way that we have not had to do up to this point. And in some respects, we have to acknowledge the fact that we cannot unring the bell. And at the very least, I think we need to be prepared for a reality that is really, really, really difficult to vet. So there we go. At the beginning of this, I argued that we can't not develop and use AI. And I think that continues to be true. But I hope that those of us who have been kind of casual in our approach to the use of AI will be inclined toward restraint. Beyond that, we should be inclined toward a human-centered approach to the use of AI that focuses on respecting centrally human qualities, purpose, and characteristics as we move forward. Thank you. I will invite questions. Sure. Oh, here's the thing. I don't know how to turn it on. Oh, there. Yeah.
Hi, Jane.
Hi,
Thank you
Elizabeth.
for this presentation. I was wondering if you foresee with this agnotological loss and what I would assume would come along with that is a growing distrust in knowledge, especially from sources that are produced post AI.
Yeah.
I wonder if you foresee like a revalorization of like old print texts, like where the sources were verifiable and like a new, at least in certain circles, a kind of prizing of books that were like printed before, at least 2020.
Books.
Yeah. Books, like physical books.
Yeah. So I love that question for a few reasons. The first is I would hope so. And I guess I'll go, sort of two avenues on this. When I was in law school back in 1999 to 2002, we took a legal writing course. And that was just when Westlaw and Lexis had really hit the market. And the idea was like, well, you don't need books anymore. And the instructors at the law school required us to spend one semester with just the books. You had to figure out how to use the books that contain the cases before you could move on to using Lexis and Nexis in the second semester. And so I do think there may be a return to books, but I know, Dr. Nelson, that you are a historian. And so one of the things I had but took out for time was the difficulty of what we consider to be primary source documents. And I do approach this as a lawyer, right? So a court opinion is considered a primary source document, but court opinions are being drafted using ChatGPT. And so even if I go to the book to read a court opinion, some of the things I might be confronting in there will be things produced by ChatGPT. So that might work for like going back, right? Like I could read some treaty from 1933 or something like that, but it might not work going forward because those things will still be kind of informed by chat. So I have a little bit of that concern. One of the things that, well, I'll leave it at that. I was gonna address some very specific inaccuracies that I've seen in court opinions lately, and concern about those things being kind of scraped and perpetuated forward. But at any rate, yes, I'm not sure that will fix it necessarily. Yeah. All right. Other questions? Okay. Did you have a question too?
Oh, I do.
Oh, gosh.
Here are the questions online.
Oh, boy.
So there's a lot of questions for you.
Oh, my.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just going to run through these then. Is that okay? Okay. So one person says, the comment about anthropomorphizing AI is timely, given I heard today that a 14-year-old boy committed suicide recently, allegedly because of some interactions he had with a chatbot. That's devastating. That's just absolutely devastating. I don't even know what to say about that. My heart goes out to his family. I'm going to move on, even though that kind of. So Daniel Gardner is a nurse at Methodist and my former mentee in the ethics fellowship. And he writes, LLMs require inordinate amounts of energy to the point that it is hard to conceive how much energy AGIs might require. How might this impact your concern about consolidation of the best AGIs? I mean, I have major concerns about the effect of AI on the environment, which I just left out because it does not have to do with our authorship kind of conversation. But I mean, I think artificial intelligence is going to be devastating to the environment. The amount of energy that it requires is just so much. So I mean, I wonder whether he's suggesting that might place a limit. I think we'll probably just develop more powerful energy or something. I don't know what they'll do. They'll have their own grid or something. AI or just machine learning tools used by healthcare insurers making decisions to deny health claims with human decisional checks and balances. What other areas where AI might be used have AI is being piloted for teaching physicians. AI is being piloted for hiring physicians and healthcare workers. I don't know that there's much that and I also there's some attempt to or promise of developing AI that would be able to listen to a clinical encounter and draft the note. Yeah, go ahead.
Catastrophize your world a little bit was that is currently being used now in a pilot study at Eskenazi, and it's working incredibly well according to my clinician friends who are part of the pilot. The immediate thing, which actually relates back to your point earlier about how the internet was supposed to be and how it is, and the price issues, is that of course you can just see what happens now, which is that all the docs demand this. Will never work anywhere without it, and the AI is charging $100 per patient to do it.
So that'll get passed on.
It's the usual thing where something that sounds too good to be true usually is.
Yeah. I also think, and all love to physicians, and but I'm not sure that their summary of it works necessarily captures what it means for a clinical encounter to work. So what they mean is that this saves me time in drafting a note, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it helps them understand their patient or understand the diagnosis that they've made. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's improved the patient's experience of that clinical encounter. It remains to be seen whether it will improve patient outcomes, which is a really objective measurement that we could have. Go ahead and argue with me.
Just all things we have to measure, right? Because the other side is present. Again, I'm a catastrophizer about AI also, but patients have limited access to physicians. There have been already some studies where responses by AI were very good and actually appreciated.
Yeah.
For access that's not being provided by humans in our current dysfunctional healthcare system.
Yeah, and I think this gets to the question of how we tier things. So you could have a physician. This gets back to the analogy that I gave earlier, right? You could have a physician who, because of AI and the alleviation of the charting burden, which I'm very sensitive to, but the alleviation of the charting burden, sees 10 patients and can spend an hour and a half with each of them. That is not what is going to happen, right? That is not what is going to happen. And so, this efficiency model, we know what that looks like, and it does not look like more leisure time for the middle class. Am I out of time? No, okay. All right. Uploading copyrighted works to generative AI is a violation of confidentiality policy. There are generative AI systems that do not train their models on or scrape the information submitted. So when I think about copyrighted works and articles, that do not, what is this? That do not scrape the information submitted and that are put forward by institutions we already use.
We skip that one, so I can ask one last question.
Google Drive does scrape.
We'll leave that one out. Maybe you can respond offline.
Okay. All right, move on.
Oh, we have more. Oh, Matt.
All right. How would the accuracy of AI generated content be assessed? I don't know. I mean, I leave that to somebody else. And I do think issues of bias are going to continue to be a problem. Yes.
One last question for one of your final talks about the end of creativity. If AI will never be creative because it's always viewing what came before. But of course, that was true for Pollock as well, right? He was processing what came before and creating. So,
not that AI won't be creative, but that humans won't. And humans require purpose and meaning and vocation. I don't know that AI does. But you know, I mean, there's a question about simply quality of life, right? And whether we continue to be happy or joyful or beautiful in a world where AI is creating all of these things rather than we are. Thank you.